I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been doing it for almost 15 years and have honestly enjoyed it. I've hauled everything from dried goods like cereal and macaroni to things like cell phones and computers. It's been a pretty well-paying career, and I've honestly enjoyed it. However, there was this one night around 10 years ago. I was hauling office supplies, such as pens and papers, halfway across the country. I'd been driving for a pretty long time, but I had a deadline to beat. I remember it was getting pretty late, but my favorite podcast was keeping me company. I guess listening to guys argue about sports made me a little less lonesome. The road got that way sometimes. Luckily, I had a beautiful fiance waiting for me at home. But on that night, she would be the furthest thing from my mind. I remember cruising down a dark and desolate highway. Things like stores and houses were nowhere in sight. In moments like this, it felt as if I were the only person in the entire world. Although I was about to be proven very wrong. Within my view, the road was clear and empty. Suddenly, something darted in front of my truck from out of nowhere. Of course, with such a big machine, I wasn't able to simply slam on brakes and stop. To my shock, I ended up hitting whatever ran out in front of me. It must have been big, as the entire 18-wheeler shook upon collision. I came to a stop as quick as I could, fearing the worst had happened. That a person, most likely, made the mistake of stepping in front of my rig. As I killed the engine, I took a minute before exiting the vehicle. After all, if I did hit someone, my life was going to be over. Getting married, having a few kids, and watching them grow. Those things wouldn't happen with me sitting in a prison cell. But regardless, I had to check on who or whatever this was. Though I had my doubts, they survived a head-on collision with a mighty semi. Within my first few steps, I heard a small squelch sound. Upon looking down, I saw a pool of blood already starting to form. Not to mention the fact that my size 10 boot was already standing in it. That's when it hit me. This had to be a human. No animal would lose this amount of blood. It was hard to fathom. But I was positive I had just killed someone. Within a few steps, however, I would be proven wrong. Pinned under the front of my truck was not the body of a human being. Instead, it looked to be some sort of creature. Upon further investigation, I could clearly see that it was dead. As for what it was, I couldn't tell you. The thing was a beast. It had to be around 6 foot tall, seemingly a canine-like creature with fangs protruding from its mouth. It could have been a large dog, but that didn't seem right, even though it was stuck. I could clearly see its broad chest and shoulders, as well as 2 long and hairy legs, almost like a man's. The only thing I could compare it to would be that of a werewolf. Absolutely stumped and unsure of what to do, I called the police. While waiting around, I couldn't help but stare at this odd being. I'd never seen anything like it before, and now even a putrid smell emanated from its corpse, like that of an animal that had never bathed before. I'd be so glad when officers finally did arrive. Maybe they could make some sense of this situation. I would soon be greeted by 2 older men giving me annoyed looks. I'm sure they had a long day and didn't care about some dead animal. But those thoughts would change as soon as they saw this thing. Both men's eyes grew wide and their skin pale. I heard one ask the other if this could be some guy in a costume. I watched as they tried to pull it out from under my truck. As they did, the smell from earlier became even worse. Though seeing that thing's entire body for the first time left us in awe. It was so big. The arms alone were thicker than some bodybuilders, as well as sharp claws that I was sure could rip us apart with ease. I'll never forget how the one man looked as he spoke into his walkie-talkie. He then approached me and shook his head before speaking.
Mister, we don't know what you hit, but we're gonna need somebody smarter than us to figure it out. Mind waiting by the car?
He asked. Now, I did have a load to deliver, but it seemed best to comply. If I was being honest, it would be nice to figure out what was lying there. After another 20 minutes passed, a second vehicle arrived on the scene. Instead of your usual police cruiser, I saw a mysterious, all-black car. A man would step out, wearing a sharp black suit to match. He looked down at the creature for only a brief moment before letting out a loud sigh. Without saying a word, he began to approach me. I'd be lying if I said the man wasn't intimidating. Something about the look in his eyes. It was cold and calculating. Like he walked through hell and came back unscathed. I remember he looked at me and spoke in a deep voice.
They've got a lot of cleanup to do here. Let's get to the station and talk about what you saw.
Once again, I didn't resist. I willingly went along with this strange man. He drove me to a nearby police station, where I was seated in an interrogation room. I was alone at first, but soon the man would return with 2 cups of coffee. He looked down while stirring his java and began talking. He told me that what I saw tonight was nothing more than an exotic pet, an endangered one that was actually very illegal to own. I couldn't help but giggle. I didn't believe what he said for a second. I told him that was a stretch, and that it looked more like a werewolf to me. He wasn't amused, as he slammed his hand on the table and shouted. He told me there was no such thing as a werewolf, that I needed to realize that this wasn't a game. He pushed how this was an illegal pet and wanted me to agree with him. It was the point that he said I could lose my job if I didn't comply. Without much of a choice, I assured him that what I hit was only a pet. Afterwards, he asked for my shoes and even gave me a pat down. It was all so strange. I didn't understand why he was being such a jerk. In fact, I felt downright threatened by him. After a few minutes, he brought me a pair of cheap jailhouse shoes. He told me mine were ruined by the blood and that he threw them out. I was pretty upset, as those were an expensive pair of work boots. But it was pretty obvious I had no room to negotiate. He didn't let me finish my shipment either, saying my truck was totaled out. I knew this was a lie. The front end was only lightly damaged. I ended up receiving a bus ticket and went back home. I was off the road for 2 weeks without hearing a thing. Finally, my boss would call and put me back to work. Weeks turned into months and then years. My fiance and I got married and even had a little boy. I continued to drive 18-wheelers, never having another incident like that again. My life was mostly normal, but sometimes weird things would happen. I'd receive phone calls in the middle of the night asking if I'd seen anything strange. I would say no and try to identify the caller, but they always hung up. At times I would catch suspicious black vehicles following my rig while I was driving. Perhaps it was all just a coincidence, and I prayed it was. Even so, I didn't believe what I hit that night was just a pet. As for its true identity, I'm sure it would forever remain a secret. If I'm being honest, maybe that was for the best.